Threadband here with Threadband Modeling, coming at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be covering a diorama type build, probably my first one, where it's going to be a 2 foot by 2 foot diorama of a airport that is local to me. This was an assignment from one of my teachers, and alongside it we had to do a essay. The diorama had to include the runways, taxiways, lighting, signage, markings, buildings, roads, trees, all that stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't meet all of that criteria. I had most of it, though. But yeah. So the airport I picked was Bowman Field out of Louisville, Kentucky, also known as KLOU. And my family actually has some historical ties to it, which is one of the reasons why I picked it. Also, I kind of knew most of the positioning of taxiways, runways, that type of stuff. But yeah, so Bowman Field was actually founded by my, great uncle about 1920. He was inspired after hearing stories from one of his colleagues that he was a fighter pilot in World War II, or recon pilot, not 100% sure, and he decided he wanted to open up an airfield. So he bought this land from a farmer who during World War I sided with Germany and moved to Germany to fight in the war for Germany, and so he bought the land from the government. So for the first few years it was an aerodrome, and then the Depression broke out in the World War, and it got paved runways, so forth, and it left the family. But so yeah, so let's watch the build. Okay, so moving on to the actual project. Before I could start the project, I had to do a little bit of research on the runways and their lengths and all the dimensions of them. So in this research, I had to turn to the AFD, where I had found that the longest runway is 4,358 feet by 75 feet with a displaced threshold, and the shortest one is 3,580 feet by 75 feet, also with a displaced threshold. And I also had to figure out how far the displaced threshold was. And then I had to figure out how to get that to fit on a 2 foot by 2 foot area. So I had to go and do some math. Turns out my math was a little off, and I'm kind of out of scale. However, that really doesn't matter, or it doesn't look like it matters that much. It just, as long as everything was I used a consistent number. So here we have a picture of the actual airport from above inside of a B-17 that I took when a B-17 was around and I got the chance to fly in it. I basically used this photo as an idea for markings and the positioning of runways, so I'd have an idea of how much space I have to work with. Okay, so another thing that I needed to do is figure out what taxiways were which. As I at the time I made this project, I had very little time actually taxiing around the airport and flying, and I needed to find some taxiways. And unfortunately, the AFD does not have taxiway markings on the diagram, so I had to turn to another source. This is a picture I found inside of one of the big hangars at the airport. Okay, so this picture is kind of unrelated to the build itself, and I found this after the fact of the build. I was trying to find a picture of the third runway that the airport had, and to get the magnetic heading of it. I just couldn't find one until I joined the EAA, and I found this at the local chapter. So to start this project off, I started off with a bunch of sheets of paper, and I arranged them into a 2 foot by 2 foot square. Once I got the 2 foot by 2 foot square together, using a yardstick, I measured out the runway lengths and positions and how far away from the edges to make them. This would later on help me when I'm actually gluing down the actual strips for the runway. I repeated this process for all the buildings and taxiways. Please note that the buildings are in no way, shape, or form in any specific scale. I did not measure any of the buildings or get any of the heights, so I was unable to do any math for those. So with the mapping done, it was time to go out and find the supplies. I needed to find a 2 foot by 2 foot board, and I needed some surface to use as a grass. I went out to Home Depot and I found a 2 foot by 2 foot piece of particle board that was perfect for this project. I also found some of this sheet of paper that had this grass stuff glued onto it that was at Michael's, and I bought some of it. I then went and I glued down using Elmer's glue the grass sheet after cutting it to size, and used weights to help make it flat. Some of you guys might have seen this photo before. This is the photo of the P51B I did for a group build. Now comes the fun part. I had to decide on what to make the runways, taxiways, and ramp areas out of. I decided on using fine grit sandpaper, as it was coarse, sort of, and was about roughly the right color as well. I also decided to use Elmer's glue to tack it down after measuring the size based off of the diagram I drew. I then also used watercolor pencils to do all the runway markings. Here we have all the ramp areas and hangar areas installed, along with the control tower, the old terminal building. These were made out of dowel rods that were then painted with acrylic paints. If you notice that the hangar areas are not connected, I later on connected them. I do not have that pictured here, unfortunately. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, model on.